The air in the penthouse was a cage of glass and gilded steel, suspended 70 floors above a city bleeding neon into the storm-slicked streets. Ilara stood motionless by the obsidian bar, a ghost in a tailored gray dress, her presence meant to be as silent and unobtrusive as the expensive art on the walls. But inside, a tempest raged, mirroring the one outside. Every nerve was a wire pulled taut, every breath a careful calculation. Her focus was the woman seated in the center of the room, a queen on a throne of black leather. Serafina Vask. Her name was a whisper of fear in the city's supernatural underworld, an empire built on secrets and blood. To Ilara, she was simply the target. The goal. The end. Serafina's scent dominated the sterile air, aged whiskey, expensive tobacco, and the sharp, metallic tang of an alpha at the peak of her power. It was like ozone and sandalwood, a scent designed to command, to demand submission. It scraped against Ilara's senses, a primal challenge that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She fought the instinct to bare her teeth, forcing her own scent into a placid, unassuming cloud of lavender and fresh rain, the scent of a perfectly docile omega. A lie. Everything about her was a lie. More ice, Serafina commanded without looking up from the data slate in her hand. Her voice was low, laced with gravel and authority. It vibrated through the floor, through the soles of Ilara's shoes, and settled deep in her bones. Ilara moved with practiced grace, her expression a perfect mask of calm subservience. The crystal tongs were cold against her skin as she plucked 2 perfect cubes from the silver bucket. The quiet clink as they dropped into Serafina's glass was the only sound besides the drumming rain and the alpha's steady breathing. As she leaned forward to place the glass on the table beside Serafina's chair, she caught the full force of her scent. It was intoxicating and suffocating. Underneath the power, there was something else, a trace of weariness, of a loneliness so profound it felt like a wound. Ilara recoiled internally, shoving the unwanted empathy into a dark corner of her mind. Pity was a weakness she could not afford. She straightened, her gaze sweeping the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below, a glittering, indifferent beast. For 6 months, she had played this part. 6 months of biting her tongue, of bowing her head, of breathing in the scent of the woman whose family had destroyed her own. She had earned this proximity, this fragile trust. She was a whisper away from her vengeance. And then she saw it. Not a sight, but a feeling. A subtle pressure shift in the air. A vibration against the glass that didn't match the rhythm of the storm. Her enhanced senses, usually leashed and throttled, screamed to life. The scent of ozone sharpened, not from the storm, but from a high-energy discharge. Her gaze snapped to the skyscraper opposite, a dark monolith against the bruised purple sky. A flicker. A minute distortion in the sheeting rain. A lens. Time seemed to warp, stretching thin. The data slate in Serafina's hand. The swirl of amber liquid in her glass. The pulse beating in the alpha's exposed throat. A steady, vulnerable rhythm. The red dot appeared, a blood-red star blooming on the black leather of the couch, less than an inch from Serafina's temple. Instinct obliterated reason. Vengeance, planning, caution, all of it burned away in a white-hot flash of pure, primal possessiveness. This kill was hers. This life belonged to her to take, not some unknown coward a mile away. Don't move. The shout was ripped from her throat, a raw, guttural command that was nothing like the soft-spoken omega she pretended to be. In the same motion, she launched herself forward. She didn't gently push, she tackled. Her shoulder connected with Serafina's with the force of a battering ram, sending them both crashing from the couch to the thick Abyssinian rug. Ilara landed on top, her smaller frame a shield over the stunned alpha. The air was knocked from her lungs, but she registered the splintering crack of a bullet punching through the window where Serafina's head had been moments before. It embedded itself in the wall with a vicious thud. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of their ragged breathing and the sudden, sharp hiss of wind through the new hole in the glass. Ilara's senses were on fire. The alpha beneath her was a confusing storm of sense, shock, fury, and something else, something that smelled dangerously like arousal. Ilara's own carefully constructed scent mask shattered, releasing the wild, untamed fragrance she always kept hidden: wet earth, pine needles, and the clean, cold scent of snow under moonlight. Heavy footsteps thundered into the room. Serafina's guards, clad in black tactical gear, swarmed in, weapons raised. "Hold your fire." Serafina's voice was a strained rasp from beneath her. One of the guards, a grim-faced man named Kale, had his weapon trained on Ilara's head. "Ma'am?" "Stand down," Serafina grunted, pushing against Ilara's weight. The Alpha was strong, but Ilara held her ground, her eyes still scanning the windows, searching for a second shot. "Stay down," Ilara ordered, her voice a low growl. Serafina went rigid. An Omega did not give an Alpha an order. It was a violation of every known social and biological law. Yet, the sheer, unadulterated dominance in Ilara's tone held her frozen. "Lockdown protocol." Now, Ilara snapped at the guards, never taking her eyes off the threat. "Kill the lights. Full blackout. Go." For a terrifying second, no one moved. They were looking at their leader, pinned by her personal attendant. Then Kale, seeing the bullet hole and the genuine, feral intensity in Ilara's eyes, nodded sharply. "You heard her. Lockdown. Move." The penthouse was plunged into darkness. Steel shutters slammed down over the windows with a series of deafening concussions, sealing them in. In the sudden, absolute black, their other senses became painfully acute. The smell of shattered glass, the cold draft, the frantic beat of their own hearts. And the sense. Serafina was a bonfire of controlled rage and bewilderment. Ilara was a winter forest, wild and dangerous. "Get off me." Serafina enunciated each word with chilling precision. Ilara finally moved, rolling off the Alpha and onto her feet in a single fluid motion. She stood in the darkness, a predator in her element, listening. The threat was gone, for now. The hunter had missed their shot. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in a low, crimson glow. Serafina rose, brushing herself off with a dangerous calm. Her silver eyes locked onto Ilara, burning with an intensity that could melt steel. The other guards kept their distance, forming a respectful, wary perimeter. They had seen the impossible. An Omega, shielding an Alpha. An Omega, giving them orders. And they had obeyed. "My office," Serafina said, her voice deceptively soft. Now, the office was as opulent and cold as the rest of the penthouse. Serafina didn't sit behind her massive mahogany desk. She leaned against it, crossing her arms, her posture a study in barely contained violence. She gestured for the door to be closed, leaving them alone. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions and the clashing sense of their true natures. "You have 60 seconds to explain how you knew," Serafina began, her voice low. "Before I decide that your heroic act was merely a prelude to your own attempt on my life." Ilara met her gaze without flinching. The mask was gone. There was no point in retrieving the pieces. "I saw a reflection off the lens. It was a partial truth." "Plausible." Serafina's eyes narrowed. "A reflection. Through a storm. From a mile away. In the dark." "My eyesight is excellent," Ilara stated simply. "Your eyesight is impossible," Serafina countered, pushing off the desk and beginning to pace. She moved like a caged panther, all coiled muscle and lethal grace. "And your scent?" "It changed. Lavender and rain. That's what you've smelled like for 6 months." A lie. She stopped directly in front of Ilara, invading her space. The height difference was significant, but for the first time, Ilara didn't feel small. "What are you?" "I'm the woman who just saved your life." A humorless smile touched Serafina's lips. "That has been established. It does not answer my question. You moved with the speed and strength of a trained soldier. You gave orders to my men. You shielded me, an Alpha, with your body. None of these are Omega behaviors." "Maybe you don't know as much about Omegas as you think you do," Ilara shot back, her chin lifting in defiance. The air crackled. Serafina's silver eyes scanned Ilara's face, searching for the truth. The raw, wild scent coming off the Omega was a puzzle. It didn't smell of submission. It smelled of freedom, of ancient forests and cold moons. It called to something deep within her, a primal instinct she hadn't felt in years. It was both a comfort and a threat. From this moment on, Serafina declared, her voice dropping to a near whisper, you don't leave my side. You eat when I eat. You sleep where I can see you. You will be my shadow until I figure out exactly who you are and who wants me dead. It wasn't a request. It was a sentence. A gilded cage tightening its bars. For Alara, who had sought this proximity for her revenge, it was a bitter, ironic victory. She was closer than ever, but the lines had blurred. The hunter who had saved her prey. Her mission was compromised, twisted by an instinct she hadn't known she still possessed. Fine, Alara agreed, her voice tight. But if I'm to be your shadow, then I need access. Full access. To your security protocols, your intel, your enemies list. I can't protect you from a threat I can't see. Serafina stared at her for a long moment, a silent battle of wills passing between them. Then, a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. Very well, little shadow. You'll have your access. But know this. The closer you get to my secrets, the less likely you are to ever walk away. Alara held her gaze, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. Walking away was never part of the plan. The next few days were a lesson in exquisite tension. Alara became a fixture in Serafina's life, an extension of her will. She stood guard outside her shower, the steam carrying the alpha scent, making it difficult to breathe. She tasted her food, a silent, grim-faced sentinel at the edge of every meal. She sat in the corner of the office while Serafina conducted brutal business over encrypted channels, her voice a weapon that could sign death warrants or secure fortunes. And at night, she slept on a cot at the foot of Serafina's massive bed, the alpha slow, steady breathing a constant presence in the dark. Sleep offered no escape. Her dreams were a confusing tangle of past and present, the scent of wood smoke and her family's laughter, twisted with the smell of sandalwood and blood. She would wake with a gasp, her hand reaching for a knife that wasn't there, only to see the silhouette of the Alpha Queen, watching her from the bed with unervingly perceptive silver eyes. The forced intimacy was a crucible. Alara learned the minute shifts in Serafina's posture that signaled her mood. She learned the Alpha preferred her coffee black, her liquor neat, and her solitude absolute, a preference Alara's presence now constantly violated. In turn, Serafina observed Alara with an obsessive focus. She saw the way Alara's eyes tracked every potential threat, the unnatural stillness she could maintain for hours, the calloused efficiency of her hands. She saw an apex predator hiding in the skin of a lamb. The contradiction fascinated and infuriated her. The shift in perspective came late one night, a week after the assassination attempt. A security breach in one of Serafina's warehouses demanded her personal attention. They descended to the garage, a concrete cavern filled with armored vehicles. "We'll take the sedan," Kale said, gesturing to a black, unassuming car. "No," Alara said, her voice flat. She walked towards a heavily armored SUV. "We take this one. The sedan's engine has a slight tremor. It's off balance." Kale frowned. "The diagnostics are clean. I ran them myself." "Run them again," Alara insisted, her eyes on Serafina. Serafina, who trusted Kale implicitly, hesitated. But the memory of the bullet hole in her window was fresh. The unwavering confidence in Alara's gaze was compelling. "Do it," she commanded Kale. A few minutes later, Kale returned, his face pale. A pressure plate explosive. Rigged to the front axle. A pothole, a speed bump, it would have been enough. Serafina's gaze moved from Kale to Alara. The Omega was leaning against the SUV, her expression unreadable. She hadn't been guessing. She had known. The shift to Serafina's point of view was dizzying. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly feel the pull she'd been resisting. This Omega, this mystery, was more than just a bodyguard. There was a current running between them, a deep, instinctual hum of recognition. Her inner alpha, long dormant and unchallenged, saw not prey, but a mate. A protector. An equal. The thought was so alien, so terrifying, she immediately crushed it. Later, back in the penthouse, the silence was different. It wasn't hostile, it was heavy with unspoken things. Serafina poured 2 glasses of whiskey, holding one out to Alara. Alara took it, her fingers brushing against the alphas. A jolt, like static electricity, passed between them. "Twice," Serafina said, her voice rough. "You've saved my life twice. How did you know about the car?" "I heard it," Alara said simply. She wouldn't explain that she could hear the subtle stress on metal, the whisper of a wire where none should be. The weight was wrong. Serafina took a long swallow of her whiskey, her silver eyes never leaving Alara's face. "The people who did this, the sniper, the bomb, their methods are clean, professional. They're hunters. My sources say they call themselves the Argent Order." Alara's blood ran cold. The glass in her hand trembled, and she quickly set it down on the bar before she crushed it. Argent. Silver. The name was a brand on her soul, the last word her father had whispered before they'd put a silver bullet in his heart. Serafina saw the flicker of emotion, the infinitesimal crack in Alara's composure. "You know the name," it wasn't a question. Alara's throat was tight. The words felt like swallowing glass. "They hunt shifters. Exclusively. And what would a quiet little Omega know about a clandestine order of shifter hunters?" Serafina pressed, her voice soft and sharp as a scalpel. The time for lies was over. The truth was a wild animal, and it had been caged inside her for too long. "They killed my family," Alara whispered, the confession tearing from her. "My entire pack. They thought they'd gotten all of us." The pieces clicked into place for Serafina with sickening clarity. The impossible senses. The feral strength. The scent of the wild. "You're not an Omega," she breathed, a look of dawning comprehension on her face. "You're a wolf. A shifter." The last one, Alara confirmed, her voice hollow. "And I came here to kill you." Serafina didn't flinch. "Why?" "Because your family financed them. Your grandfather founded the Argent Order. His wealth, his political connections, they built an army dedicated to our extinction. I tracked the money, and it all led back to the Vask name. I came here to destroy your empire, to end your bloodline, just as you ended mine." The confession hung between them, more dangerous than any bullet. The protector was the would-be assassin. The savior was the avenger. "But you didn't," Serafina stated, her voice unnervingly calm. "Twice, you had the chance to let me die. Twice, you saved me instead." "Why?" "I don't know," Alara admitted, and the honesty of it broke her. Tears she hadn't shed in a decade burned at the back of her eyes. "Instinct. Something saw you as mine. Mine to protect. Mine to kill." The contradiction was tearing her apart. Before Serafina could respond, the alarms blared. A new sound, a high-pitched shriek that signaled a full system breach. The lockdown was being overridden from the outside. Red lights flashed, bathing them once more in the color of blood. "They're here," Kale's voice crackled over the intercom. "They're coming up the elevator shaft. They've cut us off." The Argent Order. They hadn't given up. They had come to finish the job. Serafina moved instantly, grabbing a handgun from a hidden compartment in the bar. She tossed one to Alara, who caught it with practiced ease. Their eyes met across the room. "The enemy of my enemy. They're hunting a Vask," Serafina said, her voice grim. "But they're also hunting a wolf. It seems we have a common problem." Alara's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Seems so." The elevator doors at the end of the hall exploded inwards. Men in black tactical gear, armed with silver-etched weapons, poured into the penthouse. There was no more time for talk. Alara felt the change coming, the familiar, painful pull of her bones rearranging, of her skin stretching. It was a transformation she hadn't allowed herself in years, a part of her she had buried with her family. But now, trapped and hunted, the beast would not be denied. "Get back," she growled at Serafina, her voice already deepening, roughening. Pain and power surged through her. A silver-white light bloomed from her skin as fur erupted, her form elongating, twisting. It was not a grotesque horror, but a terrible, beautiful becoming. She grew, her tailored dress ripping away, replaced by a coat of thick, shimmering silver fur. Her face pushed forward into a noble muzzle, her teeth lengthening into fangs. Her eyes, once a stormy gray, now glowed with the pale, cold light of the moon. Where Alara had stood, there was now a wolf. Larger than any natural wolf, she was a creature of myth, her fur the color of spun moonlight, her eyes ancient and intelligent. The hunters of the Argent Order froze for a fraction of a second, their professional calm shattered by the sight of their legendary prey. Serafina simply stared, her heart hammering against her ribs, not with fear, but with a profound, earth-shattering awe. This was the truth behind the scent, the power behind the quiet facade. This was Alara. The moment broke. The lead hunter raised his rifle. Target acquired. Kill them both. The wolf that was Alara let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the skyscraper. It was a sound of pure, untamed rage, of grief and vengeance unleashed. She launched herself into the fray, a silver blur of claws and teeth. She moved with impossible speed, a phantom of righteous fury. Silver bullets, designed to kill her kind, sparked against the floor around her as she dodged and weaved. Serafina, snapping out of her shock, began to fire, her shots precise and deadly. She was no supernatural creature, but she was a queen in her own right, a master of tactics and violence. She laid down covering fire, picking off the hunters Alara drove from cover, her mind racing, adapting. They moved in a deadly, unspoken sync, the Mafia queen and the last silver wolf. Predator and prey, now partners in survival. They fought back to back, a storm of silver fur and calculated shots, driving the hunters into the grand living room. But they were outnumbered. A lucky shot grazed Alara's flank, and she snarled in pain, the scent of her own blood sharp in the air. Seeing her falter, the lead hunter charged, a long, silver knife in his hand. Serafina saw it before Alara did. Without a thought, she threw herself in front of the wolf, taking the blade in her own arm. She cried out, pain lancing up her shoulder, but she held her ground, a human shield for a mythical beast. Alara's glowing eyes widened. Seeing Serafina bleed for her shattered the last of her rage, replacing it with a focused, cold fury. With a deafening snarl, she lunged, her jaws closing around the hunter's weapon arm. There was a sickening crunch of bone. The fight was over moments later. The remaining hunters, their leader disarmed and broken, were dispatched by Serafina's recovering guards. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by panting breaths and the drip of blood onto the marble floor. Serafina clutched her wounded arm, her gaze fixed on the magnificent silver wolf before her. Slowly, painfully, the transformation reversed. The light receded, the silver fur melting away, the powerful lupin form shrinking back into the shape of a woman. Alara collapsed to her knees, naked, trembling, and utterly vulnerable, the gash on her side bleeding freely. Serafina walked towards her, ignoring the pain in her own arm, ignoring her guards who were cautiously securing the room. She knelt in front of Alara, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Alara braced herself for the end. She had revealed her true self, her true purpose. She was an assassin in the home of her target. But Serafina didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, she shrugged off her own jacket and gently draped it over Alara's trembling shoulders. Her fingers were warm against Alara's cold skin. "You saved me," Serafina whispered, her voice thick with an emotion Alara couldn't name. Alara looked up, her gray eyes meeting Serafina's silver ones. The penthouse was in ruins, their pasts were a minefield of blood and betrayal, but in that moment, none of it mattered. The instinct that had forced her to protect the Alpha had not been a mistake. It was a recognition. "Your grandfather built the Order," Serafina continued, her voice soft but firm. "A sin my family has to answer for. But it ends tonight. With me. With us." She reached out, her fingers gently touching the wound on Alara's side. A jolt, warm and healing, passed between them. It wasn't lust or dominance. It was something quieter, deeper. A claiming. A promise. Alara leaned into the touch, a decade of loneliness and hatred beginning to crumble. She had come for vengeance, but had found a strange, dangerous, and undeniable salvation. Looking at the Alpha Queen, who had just bled for her, she finally understood. Her instinct hadn't been about possession or a kill. It had been about finding the other half of her own wild soul.